What's up, everyone? I'm Bologna. I'm here with first time MCU movie watcher, Dougie. You've seen movies before. You haven't seen Marvel movies before. And today we got special guests, the At the Show boys, Yumper and Tony Chalsa. Guys, thank you for doing this. We've known each other a lot through White Sox Twitter and stuff like that, but it's always cool to pick your guys' brain on things outside of baseball and outside of sports. You guys are well-rounded in movies and music and all things. So thank you guys for coming on. Yeah, Dougie's representing the shirt. Yump, what's going on, my man?
Not much, man. Thank you so much for having us. Always willing to talk movies with my guys.
Hell yeah. Tony, how are you?
Doing really well. Thank you very much for having us.
Of course.
I feel like talk about this movie.
Yeah, so before we talk about this movie, the first couple guests we've had on have all been people that I know either personally or through Twitter that are really into comic books. I had my cousin Joel, that was the reason I got into comic books. He's been my like comic book Sherpa, if you will. And then we had Drew Bogues and Comic Punk Guy, who has comic books right in their name. You guys are a movie podcast. The At the Show is a movie podcast. I know you guys are film buffs. I'll start with you, Yum. Were you into comic books growing up, or even the cartoons or anything like that?
So comic books, not per se, really deeply into them. I was a Ninja Turtle kid, so I grew up with Ninja Turtles as like big into them. And then eventually what got me kind of into reading a little bit was the 90s Fox X-Men show.
Hell yeah.
So I really got into it that way. When I got older, as like I am now, I actually got into Hellblazer, which is the John Constantine comic.
Mm-hmm.
I had the first 20 comic books I collected just to read them, and I go on I have the app for Amazon, the comic app. I just read through there too. So now I'm starting to like read a little bit more into like more of that. But in terms of like Superman, I was always an X-Men person when I was growing up, besides the Ninja Turtles.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned Constantine. That's one character and one story arc that is awesome. I love that growing up, and more like as a teenager. What'd you think of Constantine the movie?
I actually liked it a lot. Like Keanu Reeves came out and said that he's hoping that a sequel gets made, and it's been like kind of like development hell for the past 10 years, 15 years. But I liked it a lot. I actually, there's actually used to be a show that came out on NBC with Matt Reeves, and it's actually really good as well. Just didn't get enough views. So I'm a big fan of the stuff they're doing. I kind of want to see how James Gunn goes about it. So excited.
I mean, that'll be interesting. I'm a big fan of all things Gunn. Tony, how are you? I know we talked pre-show and you mentioned not really into the comic books, but you're willing to watch anything and everything movie-wise.
Yeah, growing up pretty much dipped my toes in a lot of different things. So like the 90s X-Men, as Jump said, I remember getting these VHSs from McDonald's in something like that. But never enough where it was like I was a heavy collector. So like even out in the garage, I have Wolverine, I have all these figurines, but I think I just had the figurines. It wasn't like, what's the comic book and this and that. But in the film, when they started coming out with the movies, especially the very first one, Iron Man. I mean, of course, before that I had seen Blade, and I, like I said, tried to see every movie, and I'm excited to go through this one because, well, it's not something that I would usually pick to go through. So,
all right. So I'm excited to do this with you guys. Obviously, the Avengers, the end of phase 1 for the MCU, one of the bigger, if not biggest, blockbuster movies, especially of 2012. Dougie, we're wrapping up phase 1. You're the man of the hour. You're the reason we're doing all of this. How are you now, deep into almost the end of phase 1?
So the one thing that I wanted to like talk about like right at the beginning, and I'm glad you asked me that, is because it was like almost right at the beginning of the movie was speaking to me, because Samuel Jackson just goes, ship everything phase 2 out. And I'm like, is he telling me like we're going to phase 2? Like, I'm like, I'm like, is he fucking speaking to me right now? Like, like I'm getting ready to go into this like thing. And I was like, I don't know. I guess I was in my own head at that point, but I was like,
that's not really in your own head thing. Kevin Feige, the producer of all these things, and he wasn't really that. I mean, he was, but it wasn't this hands-on with the Avengers. He does that a lot. He's very into like meta So like if you hear something like phase 1 into phase 2, he's very purposely almost beating your head over the fact that like, yeah, we're going in a different direction. We're going to the next place. So it's not that wasn't by accident.
Yeah. So yeah, getting back to your question, yeah, there was some movies that I really enjoyed, and then there were a couple that I struggled through that I thought were kind of meh. So I'm excited to talk about this one today because it was a pretty decent ending to phase 1.
All right, so let's get into it. Like I mentioned, 2012, The Avengers, a budget of $225 million, a box office of 1.5 billion. That's Billy with a B. We're talking big numbers at this point. Originally written by Zach Penn and then written and directed by Josh Whedon. I was gonna get into the cast and crew. You guys know the cast and crew. It's hot and heavy. It's Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Helmsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, Samuel L. Jackson, Tom Hiddleston, Clark Gregg, Stellan Skarsgård, and Gwyneth Paltrow. I mean, they assembled a big ass. We talk about Avengers Assemble. They assembled a powerful cast. Do you guys at the show, guys? Do you guys remember, when they started casting these movies and adding on to the cast? Do you guys remember having any thoughts about like, wow, this might work, or why are they doing this, or anything like that?
I think you're muted.
Oh, yep.
Oh,
I think
sorry
we
about
lost
that.
them.
No, I'm here. So I just think the Mark Ruffalo casting was just a little bit that I was wondering about, even though I think he was considered for the role of the Hulk in the 2008 film when they went with Edward Norton. But Norton is really weird about doing sequels, and then apparently he couldn't come into agreement with Marvel for this movie. So I wanted to see how Ruffalo would play the Hulk because back then, he's like a chameleon basically with all his roles. So I just want to see how he would play it. But in terms of like Robert Downey Jr., I think was probably the best casting they did for Iron Man, like no doubt. So I wasn't too worried about the casting. I was just wondering how Ruffalo would play out.
All right, so go ahead, Tom.
Pretty much just honestly, somebody who, again, the casting is what's bringing me into these movies. Because if they casting, Adam Sandler as, Iron Man, I'm not really, I don't know. I mean, I might watch it on Netflix somewhere down the road, but not like here tonight. So,
all right, so let's get into it. The movie cold opens with Loki meeting the leader of the Chitauri, and they're basically talking about a trade. The Chitauri will give Loki an army if Loki delivers the Tesseract, which is on Earth, which is a weapon we saw in the Captain America movie, Dougie. So that's how it cold opens, with them basically brokering a deal. Loki travels to Earth, and at a shield facility, an undisclosed shield facility, basically appears from the other side of the Tesseract. They talk about them, it basically acting like a door. Someone's knocking from the other side. So Loki appears and basically goes ham on about 8 to 9 agents. I thought it was really smart of them to start off with a bang, but it really it kind of like slowly built to some action we'll see down the road. So Loki hypnotizes Hawkeye's character along with Dr. Eric Selvig, basically mind controls them. They escape with the Tesseract. There's a chase scene where it's basically explosions and, like underground tunnels and them running away. Cold open, he escapes, and it's the Avengers. Dougie, what do you think about that first beginning?
I love the action. I loved it. It was really good. The one thing that I was kind of like, wow, about was Hawkeye. Like, he never lets anybody get close, and then he gets close to Loki, and like Loki, bomb, gives him the tap, and that's it. So I was like, man, I'm like, why didn't you just, I don't know. I guess I was like being like a fanboy. I'm like, why didn't you just stay in your position? Damn it, like. But yeah, it was a really, really kind of awesome opening. With the whole thing collapsing and everything like that, and then Samuel Jackson jumping out of the helicopter and somehow not breaking a leg.
Yeah,
it was good.
So like seeing these movies now, looking back at it, like Yump, and do you guys like nitpick different things? Obviously, you guys nitpick everything. That's like the point of you guys having a show and kind of like dissecting movies. Anything stand out like action wise, whether it be not just this scene, but Marvel movies as a whole?
I don't think so. Marvel movies. I think like right now, I think we're in the cream of the crop of the Marvel like universe. I think this is like when this movie came out was like at the top tier, top tier. Josh Whedon was at the top of his game. Kevin Feige was at the top of his game in terms of writing story and then action. It just starts you off like in a roller coaster right away. A bunch of action to start you off, like Dougie said. To anybody who coming in seeing the Avengers, like expect action, and then right off the bat you get action to the title screen. So I don't think there's any really nitpicking in it. I think actually, to be honest, I watched it again yesterday. I think it kind of still holds up today. It hasn't really dwindled. What about you?
I definitely agree with what you're saying too. It's a movie that I think will stand the test of time because it's made really well, along with the actors and especially the special effects too. I mean, I think they're going to hold up.
Yeah, so this is something we talked about in previous movies of Phase One, the pacing or lack thereof. Watching this back earlier today, it's a 2 hour plus movie, but it never kind of slows down. It's kind of almost relentless in the pack. Like every scene serves a purpose, and even if there is a longer setup scene, well, I'll talk about in a little bit, they all serve a purpose to get you somewhere else. I mean, it goes from point A to point B to point C, and it's pretty quick with all that stuff. So, diving into the movie, in response to Loki stealing the Tesseract, Nick Fury activates the Avengers Initiative. It's something we've seen in previous movies, whether it be cutscenes or end credit scenes. And the first phone call he makes is to Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow. She's in a scene, kind of working. She says she's working, trying to get intel. And I thought this is a funny scene because she looks like she's playing the victim. She had everything under control. Dougie, I know you're laughing right now. I take it you enjoyed it.
Oh yeah. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I actually the whole movie throughout or whatever. I like the subtle laughs that you would get by different stuff. When she like is on the phone and she's like, yeah, she's like, she goes, I'm just about to. I can't remember the actual words, but she was like, I'm about to get this dummy. He's talking, and he's like, I'm not talking. I'm not giving her anything. Like it's just little subtle stuff like that was just awesome. And she's just like, hold, and then he's like. He's holding and he's listening to her just destroy these dudes on the other end,
Yeah, so Fury talks to Black Widow. He says, I'll take care of Stark. You go get the big guy. And immediately her eyes light up and it's like, oh, like she's got to go, convince the Hulk to join the Avengers, basically. So the next scene is him and her in India and at a remote part of India. I like how they set this up of like, obviously he's working on controlling his temper, controlling the Hulk, basically. So he's still practicing medicine and kind of like helping the world, but at his own in Bruce Banner form. From there, he agrees to go. He's like, we got to save the world. He agrees to go. Nick Fury goes to Captain America. And this is the scene, Dougie, that they teased at the end of the first Avenger, where he comes to him with a mission. And he asks him, like, are you trying to reintroduce me to the world? And he says, no, I'm trying to save it. So this was the scene they pulled directly from the trailer.
Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, that was good. And I really dug the whole like end of that scene or whatever where he's like, yeah, I bet you $10. I bet you $10 or whatever that I can't remember the exact words, but I bet you $10 the world has changed a little bit or something like that. I was like, this is pretty funny, man.
All right.
I was laughing throughout this movie pretty good.
So one of my notes was that like throughout not even Phase One, but throughout all of the MCU universe, they slowly built in like to where this point where it's like it's action, but there's a lot of comedy. I feel like nowadays, Dougie, we'll talk about this in future episodes. They've almost gone too heavy-handed with the comedy to where it doesn't mesh well. Even in the first Avenger, when we talk about Tommy Lee Jones' character, and he had like 4 or 5 little quips that all stood out and like made us chuckle. Yeah. The newer movies, it's almost too much at this point. Do you guys relate to that at all?
I can. Yeah, I agree with you.
All right. So from there, it's the first scene where we see Stark Tower. we go see Tony Stark, and Agent Phil Coulson, played by Clark Gregg, goes and basically gives Tony Stark homework. And he tells him, this is what's going on. Loki has the Tesseract. This is the science behind it. And so he opens up and he does all this. And Pepper's like, I'm going to Washington. You got work to do. From there, we go, and Loki ends up talking to the Chitauri once again. He says the Chitauri grow restless. And I added this scene in particular because if you guys see in the back, in the shadowy figures, that's the first we see of the steps and the throne that we end up seeing at the end of the movie. Dougie, at this point, you don't know what's behind the throne, right? Even though you're aware nowadays, right, of the... Can I say, I mean, we're going to talk about it later. Do you know who Thanos is? Not specifically like who he is, but you've heard of him because of the pop culture phenomenon that is the Avengers?
Yeah, I've heard of him, yes, but no clue who he is.
All right. So that's all I need. That's all I needed. I was hoping. I was like, maybe he's heard of him. From there, we'd get to the Avengers helicarrier. So at first, it's just a regular airplane carrier, and it has the turbines, goes up in the air. And I thought this is a cool scene, one, because the Avengers helicarrier in the comics is a major part of the Avengers and Nick Fury and everything else. And I wasn't sure how it was going to translate to the big screen. And I remember watching this May 4th when it released, 2012, and I was like, holy shit, they actually pulled it off with the helicarrier. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool machine.
Yeah.
All right, then. So from there, Loki goes to Stuttgart, Germany. Basically, he's in search of iridium. And I saved this scene in particular because while there is no blood, he needed the eyeball to get into like a safe, if you will. And while there is no blood, I thought this was pretty graphic for like a PG-13 movie, especially like these Marvel movies. There's a lot of kids involved.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So from there,
well, even now they're
we actually watched. No, I was just gonna say I actually watched this. My daughter Madison is kind of like starting to watch with us, and I didn't realize what was gonna happen or whatever. And yeah, you just hear like the and then the and like I was like, oh shit. I'm like, yeah, he's just. I can't remember what I said at the time, but I was like, yeah, he's just he's scanning his eyeball, like, oh, okay.
You've got a younger son. Has he gotten into the movies yet, or do you let him watch the movies? Because like you mentioned, my daughter just started watching now that I'm rewatching him, and I same thing. I knew this scene was coming, so I would just look away real quick.
So he's okay with watching like this. Like the only thing is when he sees blood, he's like, nah. Now he's at the point where he's like, he sees blood, he's like, nah, I don't want to watch this. But at that point, like he's like, what do you do? I'm like Dougie. I told him he scanned his eye. But when you guys are talking about how there's no blood in here, as the films the transition go forward, like if you notice, they start to get a little more edgy, like swearing, a little bit more blood, like more provocative scenes as it gets older. And I wonder if that had to do with the writing. If they let's reach out to the audience. Forward.
It's a good point, especially the language. Obviously PG-13 movies, like you get a little bit of leeway on what you can say and how you can say things, and they definitely take advantage of it nowadays. But this movie, for language-wise, pretty clean.
Mm-hmm.
So Loki's in Stuttgart.
Not to interrupt you, but you guys would know, and I don't. For a PG-13, how many swear words are you allowed?
Off the top of my head, I have no idea. I think they purposely left the blood out of that scene to try to get the PG-13 rating. Because I know that. I was reading that when I was doing research for this. I think they left the blood out of that scene particularly for that.
Okay. Yeah, no, I didn't know if there was like a standard or something like that. Like you can only swear like 5 times or something, but
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's like you either get one.
So the curse words that are allowed in a PG-13 movie are like damn, hell, crap, ass, bitch, bat, like none of the super hardcore ones,
Yeah, sure.
No, like, see you next Tuesdays, Dougie.
Okay.
All right, so so Loki's in Stuttgart. He makes everyone kneel. We have this brave older gentleman that says, like, I've come across older or people like you. We won't kneel like people like you. He's like, oh, there's no one like me. And he's about to, attack him with the scepter, basically. And that's where Captain America saves the day. They have a little bit of a back and forth. Tony Stark shows up, flashy as all hell, AC/DC playing. And it's something in all of this, Iron Man scenes or Iron Man movies. You get a lot of like AC/DC going. So they show up, appease Loki. He doesn't put up that big of a fight, and going forward we know why, because that was part of the plan. So that's like the first quarter of the movie. This is like the first half hour, 40 minutes into the movie. No, like 35 minutes into the movie. Dougie, from here, like, obviously, we've had a chase scene, we've had a little bit of action with this scene. How are you liking the movie so far?
Yeah, I'm digging it. I'm digging it so far into this first quarter. Yeah, just the action, and it seems like there wasn't really much, though there was story buildup. It wasn't like a long drawn out, like boring. It's like action story buildup, if I'm saying that right. So it was just kind of like what's he doing? Kind of kept me on the edge of my seat. Like, what are they going to do next with this guy to defeat him? Everything like that. So it kept me going.
All right. So from there we get they start transporting Loki to the helicarrier, and that's the first appearance of Thor. He's basically there to grab his brother, to grab the Tesseract, and kind of transport him back to Asgard, where he says he'll serve justice in Asgard. They have it back and forth versus Iron Man and Captain America, and this is the first time we see at least 3 of the Avengers in a scene together. They go back and forth. He says, drop the hammer. He says, oh, you don't want him to say that. There's a big scene. That, what'd you think of that? Because this scene in particular, there's a lot of comedy in this too while they're fighting.
Oh hell yeah, dude! The one aspect that I had me laughing or whatever was when Thor hits him with the lightning bolt, and then fucking Iron Man's like thing is like 400% charged. Like
well, you look at that.
I was laughing like, yeah, would you look at that? Yeah, no, that was pretty good. Yeah, it was a good battle back and forth, and like I said, the action just like in this movie just never stopped, and it was awesome. It was cool.
Great
I
action.
think great acting. I think the comedy too is pretty funny. Robert Downey Jr.'s lines of calling him reindeer games, not even referring to his name.
Yeah.
When they're in the park, he calls him Shakespeare in the Park. Does that mother know that you wear her drapes? Like, just to be an asshole.
Yeah.
And speaking of the comedy, once they get into the helicarrier, Tony Stark has this little thing. He does the eye patch. He's like, how does Fury look at any like left side of the screen? And then he's like, this man's playing Galaga. They talk a little more. And then at the end of the scene, this guy ends up playing Galaga. I remember this getting like huge laugh in the theater. I remember watching it live and people were going crazy. So that speaks to the comedy aspect of it, is like, as however many serious scenes there are, they throw in an easy laugh, if you will.
Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, I just skipped ahead. So I added this scene in particular because this is the first time Cap and Tony Stark kind of have a serious conversation. And from this point forward, from here up until the later movies, Dougie, you really see both the conflict and the different ideologies between Tony Stark and Iron Man. They're just different ways they go about things, different ways they see the world. And this is the bread trail or the crumb trail that they start leading with, like to the, I mean, we're going to talk about it in a few more movies, but Civil War is basically there. They just like, even from the first Avengers, they start leaving these breadcrumbs.
Yeah. I'm Team Iron Man, by the way.
Drew Bogues was last podcast talking about he's Team Cap, and Julie hated it like immediately.
Yeah.
Julie's big time team Iron Man. Do you guys have a side?
I do. I mean, if you want to talk about people who are villains, are not really called villains, we did an episode on that, and Captain America was one of my villains.
Hell yeah.
I don't want to spoil it for Dougie, but like, he's not my favorite character throughout this movie, and I just maybe the way they wrote him He's just annoying, especially in this like whole dialogue with Robert Downey Jr. And then eventually they get into a fight where he tries to tell him that he's nothing without a suit, and then Robert Downey Jr. pulls a trump card and tells him basically everything about you came out of a bottle that his dad created.
Yeah.
So
I thought that was a great line. I remember people in the theaters being like, "Oh, you know."
Yeah. Shit.
So from there, Scarlett Johansson's character goes to talk to Loki, basically to see what kind of information she could find. And this is where the spy aspect of Natasha Romanoff kind of takes off. She plays this scene really well, where she basically tricks Loki into thinking he calls her a mewling Quim, and that was all an act. It was all a front for her to figure out that like, oh, his plan is to unleash the Hulk on everyone and kind of like cause turmoil that way. And I thought, for as much as Scarlett Johansson, especially up until this point, has been used, like she really hasn't had to like, you know, like spread her legs. Like I shouldn't have said that. Spread her wings. Spread her wings as an actor.
I'm Team Scarlett.
I'm canceled. I'm canceled. I'm canceled. I should have said spread her
Wow.
wings as an actress. But this scene in particular, she really shows that she has range, and we all know that from other movies. All right, you can yell at me now, so I'm sorry.
look at y'all.
See, this is why Yumper and in the At the Show. I mean, you and people have called you, the 108 guys have called you one of the best drivers in all of the podcasts. Cancel me if you want, guys.
A couple minutes ago, I just felt bad because I was reading out cuss words. I was like, "Damn, did I just say cuss words on the show? Are kids gonna watch? I'm like, are kids gonna watch this?" And then my head go,
don't
it's
fucking worry about it.
No, I know.
Thanks, Dougie. No, but you of all people should know that like I might be shit, so you know, your balls or friends,
Just kidding.
but everybody has like an opinion, and then like, I mean, just because I don't agree with it, I mean you're wrong. Everybody's gonna have an opinion on movies. I think she does a great job here. You know, Scarlett Johansson gets a lot of bad rap for not acting well. I did a movie with her not too long ago called The Island, where she kind of does like a totally different role. So I mean, here I think it was really done really well. I think she had a really good dancing partner too in Tom Hiddleston, like who I think is severely underrated as an actor. But you know, it was a nice little scene. I like how it worked out.
All right, let me try to get to the next scene without insulting someone. So basically, Loki's plan of dividing the Avengers is working. They're all squabbling, they're all arguing with each other, and throughout all of this, he's going to catch them off guard because Clint Barton's character Hawkeye and a crew of Loki's goons are going to attack the helicarrier. So they attack the helicarrier. They cause an explosion to an engine, a turbine. And this is where we see the first glimpse of Bruce Banner turning into the Hulk in the MCU's version of the Hulk, because we've seen it with the movie we did previously with Edward Norton, but this is the first time we get to see Bruce Banner turn into the Hulk. And there's a scene with him and Scarlett Johansson. He chases her down a hallway, and she's saved by Thor. So Thor comes, attacks the Hulk, basically to save him. Meanwhile, this bozo is trying to figure out how a circuit panel works, and he's like, it runs on electricity.
By the way, Bologna, I know prior to this, when they're going over like trying to find Loki, the person who actually tells them where Loki is actually plays a significant role in later movies, and then he's actually the person too that tells them that their engine is down, which I thought was like, I didn't notice it the first time I saw it, and I've never rewatched it. That is significant later, in the later movies, which I thought he just plays like a minor character in here, but later on he did something big.
They do. The MCU does a good job of doing that, even if it's like a big role or big casting, especially when they went into like the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show. They do take a lot of the people that are in the background and give them bigger parts to kind of help with the continuity of things. So that's something they kind of get right. So Thor and Hulk are fighting, kind of like a knockout drag out fight. I tried to clip this a couple times and it was always blurry, but he hits him with the hammer. Freaking Hulk goes flying. And from there, Thor goes to Loki in the containment capsule that where he's at that was originally going to hold the Hulk if things go awry. And Loki does the classic teleportation, hologram trick. And he tells Thor, like, are you ever not going to fall for that? So Thor is now stuck inside the capsule. Loki's on the outside. Agent Coulson comes in. And once again, he does the teleportation trick and he stabs Coulson with the scepter. Before Coulson passes away, he gets one shot off with the shield gun. And I do like this scene where he talks to Loki and he says, "You lack conviction." So this is the first big death in the MCU. Dougie, what'd you think of this?
I didn't like it. I
So you sound bummed.
yeah, dude. I don't know why I really dug him as like a kind of a non-superhero character. Like he was kind of like one of those guys, and I didn't really see him dying very early or as early, as he did in phase 1. I'm like, geez, man. I'm like, I thought this guy was going to be around for like a long time, but no. I was like, it kind of bummed me out.
What I do note, or what his death definitely serves a purpose though, because it galvanizes a team. The team was, squabbling. They hated each other, arguing at every turn, and at least like his death wasn't for naught. Like it brought the team together, and so this is where we get to basically the second half of the movie, where it's gonna lead into they call it the Battle of New York. Before that, Hulk ends up falling from the airplane. He lands in an abandoned factory. Convenient. Buck as nude, as the security guard calls it. And then I saved the scene only because it made me laugh so much. He says, "Are you an alien?" And Bruce Banner goes, "No." And he says, "Well, son, you have a condition."
Yeah. I really thought right there would have been the perfect Stan Lee, like perfect little Stan Lee, but
that's a good call. It probably could have been played by Stan Lee. We're gonna get to Stan Lee at the end of the film, but yeah, that could have been easily played by Stan Lee instead of his little minor character.
See, the movie person in me wants to say like 20 movies that he's in. That is why he's in that role. That is why it's a good role for him in that role. But I could see what Dougie's saying, because it would be perfect just as for Stan Lee to see the little quote right there. Yeah. So it's cool to see it in both ways like that.
And we've seen him everywhere. We've seen him as a truck driver. We'll see him eventually as a FedEx driver. I mean, he's kind of a man of many hats. All right, so now the Battle of New York commences. Loki is at Stark Tower. He's ready to open the portal, which is going to bring in the Chitauri army. And Tony Stark goes to confront him. He takes off his suit and offers him a drink. Dougie, did you notice anything about this scene, or is it just me as the hashtag bourbon bum?
Well, so I kept kind of trying to like squint in just to see what this bottle was in the back. Is that and I wanted some more prominent bottles, but yeah, I was with the one that has its back to us. What is that?
So there is so if you start watching the MCU, you're gonna have to start looking for Easter eggs of obviously Stan Lee, but there's also a bunch of Buffalo Trace products kind of all over the place. Behind this bottle, and I couldn't clip it, is a bottle of Eagle Rare. All of the bottles are in decanters. They're all in like different no-name bottles. But every so often, whenever someone offers someone a drink or they're sitting by a bar or behind an actual bar, you'll be able to see either like Eagle Rare. Sometimes it's a Blanton's. In some scenes, it's Pappy Van Winkle. So you're gonna have to start, keeping your eye out for those too.
Yeah, I have to.
Yeah, I mean it's like blink and you miss it kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
So the portal opens up. The Chitauri army is there, and basically the battle for New York is started. And I clipped this because basically these guys are basically the underpowered Avengers, if you will. And so what they end up serving as is like basically like starting to evacuate people. Like, what else can you do? You're not like, what are you gonna do? You're
What
gonna
else are you gonna
just
do
help
here?
on the
You
street.
gotta have people out here.
Like in this scene, like they're battling the army with a bow and arrow, which has a limited supply, and a 9mm gun. And this is something that a lot of people, I remember even back in the day, nitpicked. And it's like, what are these two even trying to do? Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that lost me a little bit. I was kind of like, I'm like, man, they're fighting off a lot of people. I haven't seen one reload. I haven't seen any, I'm like, and who's to say that even bullets even do anything to these creatures? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Very valid.
That is a good. I think I kind of like this when I first saw it. I kind of thought the same, and then I thought, like, I mean, people who love Batman, he fights against all of these damn creatures and whatnot. So, and he's just a regular human that knows all forms of martial arts. Yeah, he has gadgets. It's like suspend belief, I guess.
Right. You do have to suspend belief, and there is a point to each of the Avengers serves a purpose, and they all have a role in this. And in the end, you'll find out that like they all were needed to serve some sort of purpose to defeat the army. During the battle in New York, Stark keeps telling Steve Rogers, "Let me know when Banner shows up. Let me know when Banner shows up." And Steve Rogers, like, Banner, like thinking like there's no way he's showing up. Well, he shows up. He shows up, and he has the famous scene of, like, there's my sorry, my secret is I'm always angry. He beats this fucking gigantic, I don't even know what to call this. It's a battleship alien, like, whale.
I thought it looked like a modern day Tremor, but
I like
Ooh,
that.
Tremors.
Are you guys?
I like that.
Are you
I
guys
can go
Tremors
with that.
fan?
Oh yeah.
Oh, huge fan. Yeah, one of my favorite movies.
So Hulk shows up, and we finally get the full team assembled. Captain America does not say the Avengers assembled line, but you finally get the full scene. You get like the 360 view that is used in a bunch of GIFs at the time and things like that. But even then, we got Scarlett Johansson loading that 9mm like she's gonna go do work.
Yeah, and you got Hawkeye with flaming hair.
Yeah. But I remember
scene, though.
I remember this scene in particular. I mean, people were in the theater basically almost like standing ovation. Like people were hooting and hollering and excited that they gave us one of these, comic book scenes, if you will. Because there is a lot of times we talk about it in the comic book movies where they purposely use like a splash page, and they basically take a scene from the comics and put it straight into the movies. So from there, the Chitauri, they're obviously pissed off that the Hulk shows up, and they start screaming. And Dougie, you noticed this right away, and you're like, add this to the slideshow.
Yeah. So I'm looking at these things the entire movie, and I'm like, I just can't put a finger on it. I'm like, I've seen this before. And then when they removed the face, I was like, that's it. This thing is WrestleMania Triple H, 100% WrestleMania Triple H. I was
time
like,
to play the game.
Yes.
Yeah, I need a little Motorhead going.
Exactly. Motorhead. You got the ACDC.
I like
all
it.
in the
I
same.
like
Yeah.
I like
It's
that.
It's kind of funny too. If you notice, like through the movie, when Tony's talking, he has like a fucking Black Sabbath shirt on, too, which is ironic because he's the Iron Man.
Yeah.
So in this scene, the Hulk and Thor team up to like clear out a building full of aliens, and then they had the battle from previous on the helicarrier. So like they're just nodding, like, okay, we did work, and then just really ever so slightly, boom, he's gone.
Yeah.
he gives him a quick punch, and he's out of here. Another callback to the comedy in this movie. From there, we get another scene with the Hulk and another Asgardian, but this time Hulk confronts Loki. And this is one of the bigger scenes where, Loki stands up to the Hulk, and there is no matchup. It is a squash match. It's local jobber versus Hulk Hogan, if you will. It's and he basically goes ham on Loki.
Yeah, and I read that Hiddleston actually did this like stunt. They tied a rope to him because the Hulk's, of course, CGI, and they didn't
Yeah.
tell him when it was gonna happen. So his reaction is, when he gets like flopped around. They call it the ragdoll scene.
Yeah,
And
I
he
had it
actually is
written
getting
down.
flopped around.
I had it written down as he gets ragdolled.
Mhm.
So his reaction is, "Holy shit, I just got ragdolled."
Yeah. Ugh.
So from there, the World Security Council kind of goes over Nick Fury's head and orders a nuclear missile strike to the heart of Manhattan. Basically, they're saying we're going to stop this one way or the other. There's a little scene where Nick Fury tries to stop them, but the pilot gets away and it's headed straight to Manhattan. Tony Stark and Captain America get alerted and they kind of formulate a plan. At the same time, Dr. Eric Selvig gets knocked to the ground. And this is something that I thought was really cheesy, really like classic, almost cartoon movie. It's like the same thing that happened when Natasha Romanoff and Hawkeye fought, where it's like you get hit in the head and all of a sudden you're not hypnotized anymore. That's something I like kind of nitpick. It's like, oh, you just get bonked on your head and you're good to go. That I thought it was very like Acme cartoon.
Yeah, at least Hawkeye, he got hit against a steel bar. Like
You were
this guy.
yeah.
So I don't know, man. They had to figure out some way to get him off being hypnotized.
So they figure out that he's not hypnotized anymore. He's like, I created a failsafe for this thing, and Loki's scepter, because it's the same energy as the Tesseract, is able to close the portal. So Black Widow goes and she's like, I can close it. And Tony Stark says, wait, hold on. So he basically straps the nuke to himself and he's like, I'm going up, and he's going towards the wormhole. He flies up and he basically goes into space, shoots the the nuclear bomb at the Chitauri warship. It explodes, very Independence Day, if you will. And then on the way back down, they're like, okay, close it. And you don't know if Captain or Tony Stark survives or not. He does. He's falling, obviously passed out. The Incredible Hulk makes a Randy Moss type catch. I don't know if you noticed that. He laid out for Tony Stark. It was a Justin Jefferson, Randy Moss, Jerry Rice type catch. He saves him. He's passed out. The Hulk yells basically because he's pissed off, wakes up. He's like, holy hell, what just happened?
Yeah.
But basically, the Avengers save the world.
That was, not to interrupt you, but that was one of my favorite one-liners in there. He just like looks up and he's like, please tell me nobody kissed me.
Great line.
So from there, we're wrapping up the movie. Loki and Thor go back to Asgard. He takes the Tesseract with him, and the World Security Council is kind of pissed at Nick Fury. He's like, you just let them go? And he's like, who's going to stop them? Who's going to stop Thor? They go off their separate ways, and that's basically the end of the movie. The first mid-credit scene is Thanos, our first look at Thanos. And I knew it from the comic books. Maybe people, didn't know at the time when the Marvel movie was happening, Dougie, but you obviously know who that is, like we talked about, because of the pop culture relevance of it, right?
Now I've heard of him. I didn't say that I've seen him. So my first initial reaction was, I was like, holy shit, Hellboy's in this movie, But yeah, I've heard of him, but never saw him. So, but then I kind of put two and two together when I, kind of figured it out afterwards. So,
and then the end credit scene is another comedy scene where it's basically a callback to Captain America's or Tony Stark saying, like, at the end of this, do you guys want to go get shawarma? And so you see all the wreckage, you see all the rubble, and they end up getting the shawarma that he talked about. He's like, you guys know what that is? Has anyone ever tried it? And the only note I had to this scene is so Chris Evans is covering up his face because this was shot after the movie was filmed, and he had a beard. So they had to kind of CGI like the half of his cheek, and the rest of it he saved for a different movie he was filming.
It was a
but yeah,
prosthetic they put on him.
it was a prosthetic.
Yeah, couldn't chew or anything, so they put it on his face, and that's why he had to cover it because it wasn't that great looking.
Got it. That's good to know. See, Yumper coming with the facts.
See, I just chalked it up as another Captain America lame ass doesn't want to eat. You
No, it
know,
works.
I put it in my notes. Captain America being a lame ass won't even eat in cutscene.
I like that. All right, so that is the end of the movie. I'm gonna start with Yump. With the rewatch, you mentioned it does hold up. Was there anything that stood out to you, whether it be good or bad?
So one thing that did stick out, what we know now, and how when this movie came out, we didn't know if the 2008 Incredible Hulk was in canon. Now they're saying it is. So rewatching it, knowing that, like, I think they kind of retold part of that story with him struggling to accept he's the Hulk. And then at the end of the movie, that you guys have obviously reviewed it, he says that he kind of accepts it. I'm the Hulk. This we kind of go. He kind of takes a real big step back and kind of be like struggling with it again. I think the reason they did that probably was for character development. So, but it's kind of like a rehashing. I just wish they would have went a different route in that way. But overall, I enjoy the movie. Like I can watch this movie when it's on in the middle or even from the beginning. I mean, my kid loves this movie, so I watch it whenever I get a chance.
Tony, what'd you think? Rewatching it.
I thought it was good. Like pretty much Jump said, it's one of those that you could put on at any time. Big fan of Mark Ruffalo. Him in the whole movie is really, really awesome, and everything, of course, Robert Downey Jr. is doing. And to me, it's like phase 1 and phase 2 are pretty good, and then after that, you're starting to get into some uncharted water. So I'm excited to hear what you guys are going to say as you get into those later phases.
Yeah, there's gonna be. It's interesting to see where Dougie is. I feel like Dougie. We talked about kind of getting into it, and now you got the family into it.
Yeah.
What was your overall thoughts on the first big blockbuster of the MCU?
So going into it, I was a little apprehensive because I didn't know how they would get all of these characters to mesh. And I don't mean just like in the plot of the movie, but meaning like how do you make them all stand out in their own individual ways, like as one movie, and have enough time to do that? That was the one thing that I looked at, because I always kind of look at it before I do, is I'm like 2 hours and 30 minutes. I'm like, holy shit, there's a lot of big characters in there to squeeze in that time frame. So I felt like the movie could have went a lot longer. It left me wanting more. The other aspect, I wish Thor would just stop being a good brother and like just say Loki's an asshole and just get rid of him, but he's always trying to defend him. And I mean, even in that one scene where they're, sitting there, he's like, well, Loki's just kind of like misguided or whatever. And he's like, well, he killed 80 people yesterday. And he's like, well, he's my stepbrother.
Yeah, he's
He's not
adopted.
my real brother. Yeah, he's adopted. There you go. Yeah, he's adopted. But yeah, Hulk, a tremendous improvement from the Hulk movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I do love Edward Norton and everything like that, but I felt like the recast was good in my opinion. Yeah, it was really, really good. The other thing that like I felt like would be nervous for me if I was watching these one by one, year by year. This was a 4-year buildup, and if this movie sucked, you're like, you invested 4 years into this buildup, and if it was a flop, like that's a big flop. But I felt that they nailed it. I think that they nailed it.
Yeah, you make a good point where when we were watching these and we talked about me and Jason going to the midnight shows of all these movies, it was 6-8 months waiting, maybe sometimes a year waiting in between movies. And you expect all of these to have think of them as good movies, but if one lays an egg, you're like, damn, like now we got to wait another 6 to 8 months for another one. So yeah, that's a good point. All right, we're gonna get to our grades. Dougie, you have I'll show the grades that we had up for the previous movies. I forgot to add the Captain America one. That was my fault. I was busy at work and I didn't add our scores in. But I'll let our guests go in first. We usually do this 0 to 10 score. You could add the decimals if you want. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you guys could grade them however you want. If you guys want to go A and B and C, But what would you give this as just a regular movie, not even a comic book movie? Just what would you give this grade as a movie?
As a regular movie, like I would just go like as a comic book movie in terms of
Okay.
the way thing. I would say a 7.5 to an 8 is what I would give it. Uh, I saw you had like Thor at 8. I think it's a little better than Thor. So I'll go with 8. I'll go with the high end. I'll go 8 for this one.
All right, Tony.
Very, I like your guys' scores. You know, there's no 9s. You're not really hamming it and say, "Oh, this is the greatest movie ever." I mean, and some of these are really good movies. So these are honest. I'd give it the 7.5.
Okay. All right. So I did mention that like I probably am gonna change the grade on Thor. In my first rewatch, like when I rewatched it again, I was like, oh man, I liked it. I liked it as a fish out of water story. But now we've had 2 movies, whether it be Captain America: The First Avenger and now this movie, that is much better than Thor at an 8.1. So I fucked that one up big time.
Yeah.
All right, Dougie. No, go ahead. Yum.
Go ahead, Yum. Go
No,
ahead.
no, just totally agree. I kind of the opposite with Captain America. The First Avenger, I thought that was the worst one, but it's just me.
Yeah, I did not like Captain America at all.
Yeah, you did not
Still
like
don't
it.
like him.
Dougie hated it.
Yeah,
I hated it, but he did not like it.
Skull? He wasn't cool.
So we both like the Red Skull. I thought he was one of the better villains that the MCU got right. There's a lot of villains they don't get right, and at least for the first Captain America movie, I thought the Red Skull played a very good role, and obviously Hugo Weaving's a great actor. So.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. Captain America is just too like goody two shoes for me. You know, he's just, you know, even like in this Avengers movie or whatever, you know, like I don't care about like other people's beliefs and religions, but he's like, oh, there's only one God, you know, and I'm like,
and he's
settle the fuck down,
and he's not dressed like that.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And it's just like
he's a kiss ass. That's why I like him.
You got to remember though,
totally.
I mean, he's basically a guy from the 1930s.
Yeah, you should go the fuck back there too. I'm done with him. Yeah, he just does nothing for me. Nothing for me.
All right, what does this movie do for you, Dougie?
This movie is definitely my favorite so far. So this one, I'm going to be rating it a 8.1.
Okay, 8.1.
Yeah. Like I said, I could have easily watched another half hour to an hour of this movie. The Hulk character wanted me leaving more Hulk, even though, you know, it's one of my least favorite movies of phase 1. But yeah, I mean, just every aspect of it, like I was saying before, they just meshed it very well together. The subtle comedies and everything like that. It was really, really well done, in my opinion.
All right, so I am going to go kind of fanboy, and I will give it the highest score so far for any of the movies, because I do think rewatchability is just that high, where if it's on TNT or if it's on something, and if you catch it in the middle or even at the end or in the beginning, I'm sitting down and I'm probably watching it with or without commercials. And as we get into phase 2 and phase 3, I still think this one, I mean, obviously is the thing that like launched it to the stratosphere. I'm going 8.4 for the Avengers. I think there's still some heavy hitting movies that we're going to get to, Dougie. I'm excited for you to watch those. But yeah, we're on to phase 2, my man. I'm excited that you kind of like, you know, said like, let's do this, and you're enjoying yourself, and I'm enjoying myself, you know, going back and watching this. Before we let you go, Yump, Tony, talk to people about the At the Show, because it's obviously it's almost a must listen. If I can't catch it live, I'm going back and I'm rewatching it, because I do like movies a lot, and you guys do a great job breaking down anything in all kinds of genres. So let the people know, where can we find you?
You can find us at the Show Pod on Twitter, or at Statistic Penguin Studios on YouTube, or on our website. Basically, it's just a show, like you said, just breaking down movies. We have nice little segments we just added in with some special guests from White Sox Twitter, whether it be Mailman Jack or Roxy. And we have another segment called In Defense Of, where you can come on and you think it's a bad rap.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love everything about At the Show. Tony, you also have a movie or a music podcast, and I've been a guest on that. We talk anything and everything movies or music. It's something that we talked about the Grammys pre-show, and you have such you cast a wide net when it comes to music, which I could appreciate. Tell the people about the music podcast.
Well, everything with the movies and the music is pretty much like me in middle school, how I made the friends around me. I'd be like, what are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you listening to? What are you watching? So even Dougie, when we saw the movie over the summer, Indiana Jones, he was sitting right in front of us. And after, he's talking to me. And now from now on, I always say to my wife, that's the cool dude that talked to us after the movie, because that's my description to him. And well, that's what it's always about. It's just making these connections. And when Yumper said this, I talk about whatever movie you wanted to talk about, Shrek, whatever you want to talk about tonight, I would have been game. So thank you very much for having me.
No, of course. And you mentioned the connections. Obviously, Yump, I consider you a close friend now. We started as, like White Sox fans, and we meet, through Twitter and going to games and things like that. And now you, Tony, like, it's just like, it's a community, and it's been awesome to meet everyone. Most people, but it's you meet a lot of really cool people, and I consider you two, top of the line. So thank you guys for doing this. Thank you for agreeing to do this. Dougie, thank you once again for agreeing to do the MCU review, because I'm having a blast.
Absolutely, man. I'm having a blast too. And also, when we got Bologna versus Johnny in the bowl off, me and Yumper the undercard. So,
I like that. I forgot all about that. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah. This is matchup number 2.
Have you guys set up any stakes for the bowl off?
No, not yet.
We haven't negotiated yet. But I was thinking we might stick with the same terms that we have. So currently, right now, I have a beer waiting for Yumper, and Yumper's got to take it down, and I might have him chug just a little bit of it. As part of the first matchup that I won. If he's lucky enough to beat me in the second matchup, maybe we do a beer and a movie review. But we'll see how it all plays out. He's got to beat me first.
Yeah, I got to roll. What would you get last time, Dougie? Like a 90?
Yes, that was my high for the day. 90.
I love it. All right,
No,
I'm excited about it. I'm excited for the bowl off. I'm excited for everything. Dougie, you've got your the weight loss contest going. You're deep in it every Friday. We got the Bumpcast Monday nights. We were doing the bourbon reviews. Jason just started a new series of making cocktails behind his bar, where he's been a bartender for many years. So he's been killing it with that. So yeah, thank you guys. If you can, please like, subscribe, and share all of that fun stuff. And we'll see you next week for phase 2 of the MCU review. See you guys.